our recommendation to students as well is that they should try to learn how to use AI in such a way that it enhances their learning, right? It's not something, okay, now you get an exercise and I'm going to use AI and then that's going to solve the exercise. I mean, then you're not doing anything yourself. You're not thinking, you're not developing your own competences.
That's like the biggest opportunity of AI, but also the biggest threat.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, the worst scenario is that we are teaching students something, they're using AI to solve a problem, and then we are using AI to grade them.
Yeah.
Right?
What's the outcome of that?
Lisa Hehenberger has spent 10 years working at ESADE, a university that ranked number 5 in the top European universities list by the Financial Times last year. She's the chair in social impact and the dean of the business school, and brings a deal of expertise by having watched students, founders, and investors navigate the world of impact. This episode is about how to act in a world shaped by AI, shifting careers and new models of capitalism.
Welcome to Reinventing Capitalism, the podcast where I, Claudia Thomas, decode the success of for-profit impact businesses through the stories of their founders. Our goal is to inspire you towards a purpose-driven career, because life's too short for boring jobs and soul-crushing corporations. Quick note before we get back to the episode. Just give me 30 seconds of your time. 2 things. The first is a huge thank you for listening and tuning into the show week after week. It means the world to me. And the second is that we are just getting started. If you enjoy what we do here, please join the 14% of people that listen to this podcast regularly and follow us on this app. I promise to do everything in my power to make this show as good as I can, now and into the future. Thank you. Okay, Lisa. Shall we start?
Yes, of course.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here in your offices. I was just saying earlier how I love your background, so I'm having the better view for the interview.
Okay, well, great. Yeah.
Let's start by understanding what has been your development within the world of social impact and impact investing. So I wanted to start really at the beginning, when you just got into, when you started your career really, and how one thing led to the other.
Yeah, so I mean, if I really want to start from the beginning, I had always an interest in sustainability growing up, in the environment, in animals and so on. And then, during my studies, I got into the topic of of investment banking, because I was kind of steered away from my actual interest. And then I worked in banking for a few years, and then somehow realized that I wasn't really working on what I was passionate about. And then I decided to do a PhD. I wasn't quite sure what the subject should be, but while I was doing my PhD, I found a topic called venture philanthropy, which was really interesting, because it was really sort of at the early stages of the evolution of impact investing. So this was kind of a predecessor almost to impact investing. But the idea here was that you're using venture capital practices, investing in social enterprises, with the objective of helping those social enterprises become more financially sustainable and less dependent on external funding, and then at the same time, having a positive impact on society, through their business models.
Which are the key venture aspects that were brought into philanthropy?
So there were several aspects, but I think the main aspects really, it's about investing in the company rather than sort of providing grants to projects. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of a reaction against traditional philanthropy, saying that, sometimes traditional philanthropy is not really helping the companies become more financially sustainable, because it's just providing grants for a very short-term period. It's not usually providing grants to the core structure. It's more about financing projects, which means that the social enterprise is not able to hire good people. It's not able to think long-term, think strategically, because it just has funding, for a very little short period. So I think that that's a main part, that you're investing in the company rather than in projects. Then there have been innovations, I would say, that are diverge, from venture capital. So venture capital models tend to be quite sort of focused on equity investment, whereas in impact investing, there's much more sort of innovative finance, different types of blending and, using financing instruments in a way that is really tailored to the needs of the social enterprise that you're investing in.
So essentially you're saying that there are many ways in which you can invest in a company, especially in a social enterprise. And so with innovative finance, you're able to decide ad hoc what the company needs rather than just reproduce the venture capitalist system.
I would say in an ideal world.
In an ideal world.
What happens though, and I'm doing some research about this, but since there are certain models that exist in the financial markets, and those are accepted, and those are the ones that are used, they tend to be replicated as well in impact investing. Okay, so the ones that started setting up and raising money for their first funds, they already had a difficult sell, when they had to explain what impact investing was. That, okay, we're actually investing in companies, because venture philanthropy then evolved to impact investing, which has also a financial return objective, right? Yeah. So you're trying to generate a financial return, but also social and or environmental impact with impact investing. Yeah. So in a way that was already something quite different, right? That you had this impact aspect. But then if you want to have that thing as something new, and then on top of that also have very innovative and different financing models, the first impact investors thought that was too much. So they had replicated quite a lot the sort of traditional VC model in impact investing.
Yeah. So you did your PhD. What happened after?
Right. So I'm thinking now, like, why I made that decision. But actually, the normal thing when you do a PhD, like the most traditional thing, is to continue in an academic career, right? And then try to become a professor and teach and do research at the university and so on. At the time when I was finishing my PhD, I was actually hired by the organization that I was doing research about. Okay. So I was collecting data for my dissertation about, from the European Venture Philanthropy Association, which was a network that was set up in 2004. So when I did my PhD, I got in touch with them. I started attending their events. I started writing reports for them and helping them with data collection and so forth, which was then also useful for my own dissertation. And then when I was finishing my PhD, they hired me as their head of research. Okay. So then I was running the research center of that association for 6 years. Okay. Where I was collecting data about the sector, writing practitioner reports, so things like how to measure impact, how to provide non-financial support to the companies that you're investing in, things like that, but also collecting data and presenting this to the European Commission and saying, okay, this is what the sector looks like. You have to take us seriously because there's quite a lot of money invested, and this has potential to generate impact, and this can create jobs, etc. So which is always an interesting thing for a policymaker, right? Yeah. So that's how we also then got into policy work and started collaborating with the European Commission. Okay,
so that was the moment where you were working for the organization plus the European Commission, and then we arrive at the moment where you start working with ESADE.
Right, so after a few years of doing this, which was fascinating because we were basically like building an industry. Yeah. I had
building an industry though. Why building an industry?
Because when I started working on impact investing, like it hardly existed, right? There were a few funds that we were getting together through the European Venture Philanthropy Association. There was some funding available with the European Commission. So, and then at the same time there was no real regulation in the industry. So we were like co-creating in a way the regulation together with the European Commission. Okay. They were asking us like, how should we regulate these new funds? Like, what should be the specifications what are the requirements for setting up such a fund? So we were helping them create those guardrails. I understand. And then the data about the sector and so on. So like we were in a way helping to generate a new industry in Europe, which was really fascinating.
Very fascinating.
But I think I had sort of an urge to come back to research. Okay. So I really love doing research, and I had an opportunity then to apply for a job at ESADE, a professor job. And it was also like my children were born during my PhD, so they were babies basically when I started the job in Brussels and they were like a little bit older, so it was somehow more manageable to become a professor. So that was also one of the reasons why I said, okay, now it's a good time. So I've been at ESADE now for almost 10 years as a professor and also researcher, of course, like setting up several research centers and so on.
Before we get into what you do at ESADE, I would love to pick up your brains on, after all this experience of you building impact investing regulations and like, I guess, spreading the word of what these new funds or vehicles could mean for the world. What do you think is the biggest myth of putting business and doing good together? Like, is it possible? Is it actually possible? Or it's something that it's more of a utopia?
I think this is the objective of impact investing, right? So you're trying to identify business models that are viable, that you can scale, that can generate financial return, and at the same time, they're addressing some kind of social or environmental challenge, right? So I would say that definitely there are a lot of success stories in the sense of companies that impact investors have invested in that have grown and have addressed these problems, right? Then you might say, like, of course there are also cases where that didn't work, right? I do think that in recent years, and this is not just thanks to impact investing, I mean, it's social innovation, social entrepreneurship. It's also a lot of public funding, that has gone into these types of solutions. But definitely, I think the mentality has shifted in the sense that it's not sort of business on one side and, social innovation on the other side, but, you can actually combine those and you can have different types of business models where you generate more or less of a financial return at the same time as addressing a social and or environmental challenge.
Yeah. How would you spot, or like, what is the framework maybe that you follow or that our listeners could follow to determine whether if a company can actually embed these impact in its business model? Because there's also a lot of greenwashing right now in a lot of companies that use the concept to sell themselves, to attract talent. What would you say is a quick, framework to analyze these companies?
Yeah. I mean,
there's no shortcut.
Quick frameworks. Which is of course the expertise of a business school, is to create business quick frameworks. But
there you go.
I mean, what the framework that I use quite a lot in class and as well, in practice, it's what we call a theory of change that you might have seen in your class. I mean, I find it quite helpful as a starting point, to really like set out the objective in terms of the problem that you're trying to solve, like try to connect it to the activities of the social enterprise, to see sort of the causal effect between the activities and some sort of change, that you're achieving through those activities. And in the beginning, it's a sort of a theoretical setup where you just kind of map it out. And then you start collecting the data and you have the evidence to support your claims. And you can start having like a much more complete picture of the impact that you want to achieve. But yeah, I mean, I would say like theory of change is a good starting point. And, if you look at a social enterprise that really has thought about it and has like a well thought through theory of change, and you can think, okay, they're taking it seriously, like they're they already have some evidence and so on. I mean, that is usually like a good way to identify, whether this is like authentic, right? When it comes to the impact investing side, so looking at impact funds, because since this has been quite a trend, in recent years, there are quite a few fund managers that have set up impact funds. Yeah. And in some cases, there are maybe traditional fund managers that were not doing impact investing before that are now doing impact investing. And then you start thinking, okay, are they just doing this, to be able to raise money for their fund? Or, are they like genuinely into impact investing now? And I think there are ways of identifying, whether that is true, for the impact fund. So, it could be about having like a dedicated impact manager. It could be about like following certain, using certain types of indicators. It's about as well integrating impact into the investment process, so that it's not like an add-on at the end. Okay, let's put an impact screen on, although like most of the analysis has been about financials. Yeah, so I think there are ways of sort of seeing, if they're authentic, like about the impact as well.
Absolutely. Let's move on to your work here at ESADE. You act as the chair in social impact and the dean of the business school. How are these two related? Like how do you manage both, and how are they interconnected? Yes.
Yeah. So I would say like both roles are quite recent. So I had been already working for the past 5 years or so on running a research center called ESADE Center for Social Impact. Okay, so this was set up with the objective of really working on research projects about social impact, but also for social impact.
Okay.
So we tried to set up projects in such a way that we were working with different types of organizations that want to enhance their own impact. So we try to help them do that, by coming up with frameworks and data, etc., that helps them understand better if they're doing well, let's say. But then we also wanted to generate impact on society through the research that we were doing, so that we would be able to publish those reports to a larger audience, so that it wasn't like a consulting project for a specific organization, but it was more about generating new knowledge for the sector, let's say. So this was kind of the objective of the center. And then last year we launched a chair in social impact, which is a bit like a next step from the center. Okay, so the idea of the chair is in a way to use a venture philanthropy model, but in research. Okay, so thinking about the way research centers are run, unless you have a huge endowment and so on, many centers are run with project funding. So you get funding for a specific project, you run that project, and then what next, right? And that makes it very difficult to actually invest in resources for research. You cannot really hire staff, or you cannot hire postdoc researchers, or people who are trained in research to actually conduct the studies, because you only have funding for your next project. So the idea of the chair is to get more structural funding, more long-term. So we have funding for 5 years from 4 different foundations. And this helps us be much more strategic about the research that we're doing. Okay, which are the big topics that we want to work on in the coming years? Then also based on this research, develop trainings, so that we are disseminating the knowledge beyond to students, but also to executives. And then we organize an event and so on. So there are like a number of things related to the research that we do that helps us spread the word and replicate the knowledge, and in this way have more impact, right? So it's a kind of an accelerator of impact.
Yeah. What would you say are the 1 or 2 priorities of research in the next couple of years?
For the chair?
Yeah.
So in this year we're working on, we started very in an ambitious way by choosing one of the most difficult topics, which is how to measure systemic impact.
Very difficult. It is.
Right. So this is the first topic that we're working on.
Yeah.
We have a number of topics that we might work on next year. I don't know yet, because we have an advisory committee that is actually convening in a week. So next week we'll have some ideas about what we want to work on for next year that we'll present. We did that because we want to have a governance system that is not just us deciding what we're going to do, and not the funders deciding, but together, and also with other external advisors, who could help us really be at the forefront of knowledge generation. Okay, so that's what we want to work on, but it's all related to social and environmental impact, in some ways.
Let's move on to the topic of students. I'm very curious about students and the younger generations, because all the research that I read is that the priorities of new talent, so younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, are changing, and purpose and meaning, it's becoming a top priority. One of the ways in which this cohort find meaning is through work. So it seems that the ways in which they choose where to work and what to study, it's changing, and positive impact, purpose, or environmental impact as well, taking a lot of space. How do you feel that this concept of purpose and impact is kind of impregnating students? What do you see in the university?
Yeah, and maybe come back to your previous questions. I didn't quite fully answer, because you said, how do you combine the work of the chair and being the dean? Okay.
Oh, true.
True. And I think probably answering that question maybe helps as well address the next question. So I became the dean of ESADE Business School in December. So it's quite recent. Thank you. And one of the reasons I think why I was an interesting candidate for the role was the work that I have been doing on impact. So ESADE is now building its next strategic plan, and one of the key pillars of the plan is what we call meaningful impact.
Of course.
So we want to work on the topic of impact really in how we are teaching students. So making sure that students are, of course, learning their core skills and competences that they need to be, successful in their careers, but then at the same time helping them become human beings who can lead in a purposeful way. So be aware of the different challenges in society,
the different stakeholders,
inequalities, etc. So that they have this as part of their toolkit, let's say, or even more than a toolkit, because a toolkit is probably more the competences. Here it's like an underlying set of core values that we want them to develop during their education. And you can think of doing that in different ways, right? So one way could be the subjects that we teach them, to expose them to, sustainability, to impact, etc. And then we have a lot of different courses connected to impact. But then another part is also how we teach. So today, we actually had the launch of an initiative around service learning. So we had a service learning day. And I mean, this has been actually, service learning has existed at ESADE for many, many years. Okay, so we have our flagship program, it's called ESADE Sud, and it's really about offering students the opportunity to do a consultancy project. Normally it's in a developing context, and we have a team, a wonderful team that then chooses these NGOs or associations that need help, and then we send our students there for some time. It could be 2-3 months, and then they apply their skill set that they have learned here, but in that context. So this is just one example of service learning, but it helps them, apply their knowledge. So they kind of consolidate their learnings. Then, of course, they are exposed to like totally different environments that they're not used to. So it really opens their mind and helps them grow as human beings. You know? So these different experiences, we want to enhance and make that much more of an integral part of the curriculum at ESADE, so that eventually like all students that go through ESADE should have some elements of service learning, in their experience here, right? So that's the kind of the student part. And then there are other things as well that we do with students. And we also organize a lot of things outside of the classroom, so not just what they learn in class, but then they have challenges, they have talks and study tours and lots of things that are connected as well to impact. And then on the research side, what we're working on now is to look at the different research centers that have been operating for a while, and then maybe there are some new ones, but to see really how the research that we're generating is having an impact on society, by helping organizations, by including the learnings as well in the classroom, connecting it back to the teaching, and as well could be like contributing to policy, could be contributing to, different events and conferences, but really having a clear objective in terms of the research being somehow impactful. And that could also then be the topics that are chosen, right, for the research. A little bit like similar to what I explained when it comes to ESADE Center for Social Impact, but so they're replicating that logic, for some of the other research centers.
Hi, can I ask you a quick favor? Every week, we dive into the stories of founders that do more than just make money. Our mission is to prove that a career in impact can be both purposeful and financially sustainable. If you believe in creating meaningful work, share today's episode with one friend who's ready to make a difference. It would mean a great deal to me. Your support is what keeps this show alive and growing. Thank you. So do you feel that students, when they graduate, be it from their undergrad or their master's programs, do you feel that they're more entitled or like decisive to choose social impact businesses, social entrepreneurship companies, rather than traditional career paths?
I mean, I would say like, first of all, it's one of the things that I want to work on is to have data about that, because right now it's a little bit like anecdotal evidence. I mean, since I teach these things, I get a bit of a biased sample of students.
How would you track it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be ways of tracking it by trying to understand where they are at the beginning, and then like what are other influences during their trajectory through ESADE, right? I mean, that it might not just be thanks to what they learn here, and then what do they know when they exit, they graduate, and then where do they end up? Like, but it's a bit complex, to actually
it's hard to track. It's hard to
track and measure all of this, but that would be ideal, to be able to know this. I do think that there are a lot of students interested in these topics, but of course, there are like a lot of different career options, when they graduate, and many more traditional options are still very popular, right?
Yeah, and Something that comes to mind now is the opportunities for recent grads, because we've talked about undergrads, also masters and MBAs. Masters and MBAs, it's likely that they'll have some work experience, but not recent grads. Considering the change in the job market that we are undergoing because of AI, how are you guys approaching it as an organization?
Yeah, no, that's a great and difficult question, right? Because it's changing so fast.
Yeah.
That I think what we're, of course, realizing, is that with this very fast changing job market, we also need to be agile, in how
Absolutely.
we are adapting, how we are providing them with recommendations. We have an excellent career team that is very much sort of on top of the recent trends, etc. I mean, I do think that the things that they learn here, it's not just skills, but it's also critical thinking. It's also about how to work in teams, how to work with other people, how to present themselves. So definitely they're learning a lot of skills that I think will be
useful regardless.
Increasingly relevant and useful. Of course, they have to be probably like more agile themselves as well and adaptable, like going forward, because things are changing. I mean, we're also including AI, in the curriculum, right? So we have, apart from developing, we're launching actually. We did launch some years ago a double degree business and AI, and then next year this is going to be as a specific 4-year degree, which is on business and AI. So I mean, we've been working on that, and we also have a master's in business analytics. So these things are like, but and like talking to as well to various of the academic directors, we want to make it like much more transversal, like, so it's not just if you're taking that, but it should be integrated in everything that we're teaching and so forth. I mean, it is hard currently for academics to make sense of what this means as well in the classroom. Of course, like now when you teach something, like the students are using AI to solve problems and so forth. So we also are developing protocols for
how to use AI.
Like I think obviously for us, our recommendation to students as well is that they should try to learn how to use AI in such a way that it enhances their learning, right? It's not something, okay, now you get an exercise and I'm going to use AI and then that's going to solve the exercise. I mean, then you're not doing anything yourself. You're not thinking, you're not developing your own competences.
That's like the biggest opportunity of AI, but also the biggest threat.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, the worst scenario is that, we are teaching students something, they're using AI to solve a problem, and then we are using AI to grade them.
Yeah.
Right?
What's the outcome of that? No one knows.
If it comes to that, then it's like, what's the point, right? Yeah. So I think we really need to work on, how AI can enhance the learning so that they accelerate it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And this is what we're working on. So
this reminds me of an article that I read recently. I read on The Economist that it was talking about the fact that it is evident and obvious that AI is going to replace certain tasks of entry-level jobs, not to say the majority of tasks. And so it was encouraging leaders to rethink not which tasks would be replaced, but rather how would recent grads spend their time in a most efficient way? Like, okay, let's assume that recent grads can use AI to do these tasks. Perfect. They have 80% of their time back. What should they do to enhance the organization? Like, let's think more conceptually about how can they use their time and their skill set rather than just assume that they're going to be replaced.
Yeah. No, totally. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's a hard one though, but that would be the concept of social impact and conscious capitalism. Like, how can we, make decisions that are good for everybody and not just for the shareholders, considering that AI definitely will improve efficiency, but at which cost to society?
Yeah.
How is the shift for MBA students? I don't know if you have that data, but the previous question was whether you see that more undergrads or master's students are more turned towards social impact careers. Do you have any data on MBA students? And the reason why I ask is because MBAs already have experience in the workplace, and it seems from what I've read that people do the change towards social impact or purpose-driven job a bit later in their careers?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, because what I see is, of course, like many of our MBA students, they decide to do an MBA to change their career, right? It's perhaps, they have been working on something for some years and they feel like, okay, they need to somehow pivot, right? And some, of course, pivot into social impact, throughout their MBA. We have actually something called a social impact track. So we have several tracks in the MBA, and one is social impact. And what we offer then is that they go through what we call a social impact lab, where, they have certain workshops, and, they have to, we encourage them to do certain study tours and visit certain companies and do some reflection and so forth. So this goes on for a few months. And then there are also certain electives that they can choose from. And, once they have completed that, they would have, like a specific social impact specialization, let's say. So we have been now for some years I've been teaching 2 courses in the MBA, and we're now like changing it a little bit for next year. But one of the courses is social entrepreneurship and impact investing, where we go through kind of the different models of social entrepreneurship, the sort of measurement part, and then they develop an impact investing strategy for a fund that they're making up. And so this is like the first part of the course. And then there's a second part, which we're now changing for next year. It's called Impact Investing in Action. And this year we're starting a collaboration with some of the most prominent impact fund managers in Barcelona, so that it becomes really practical and hands-on, and where we plan to go through like the different stages in the impact investment process, so that we would have one fund manager come and explain how they develop a deal pipeline, right? And how they screen their deals, and how they conduct their due diligence, how they develop a term sheet, how they do evaluation. So like going through the entire process, but with impact investment managers. And then they will also have some opportunity to do some internships with them, so that there's kind of already a kind of immersion in impact funds. So we're hoping that this will be an incentive for students to, we actually have a lot of, so back to your question, we have a lot of interest, in these topics, but we also want to enable them to get like an entry point, in their career into impact investing, which is not so easy, because it's still not such a big market, so there are not that many positions, but there are actually quite a few interesting fund managers in Barcelona.
Yeah. There are. Yeah. I'm quite surprised about how developed it is compared to other cities in Europe, actually. We've talked, just to close the topic on AI, we've talked about the skills that you need to teach students, how it's going to change the workplace. So considering that it's also a bit of a threat for students, and considering everything that you're teaching students to incentivize them to have these sort of careers, do you think that, or how do you think that purpose can be a competitive advantage for companies when it comes to students' eyes, or recent grads' eyes, or MBA's eyes?
For the companies, so attract students, you mean?
Yes, exactly. Talent, let's say talent.
So yeah, I do think that students are sort of interested in working for companies that are not just, worried about their financials, but actually also have a purpose, because it helps, to set direction. It helps as well, I think, motivate yourself, so, I saw that not long ago. I was teaching an executive session on social entrepreneurship in, one of the most prominent Spanish social inclusion companies, that they work, with hiring people with disabilities, but then it's more like facility managers and they have certain services that they deliver. And they were saying to me, like, what makes them like really excited about getting up in the morning, it's because they have this purpose. Like this is really what drives them, not so much the business itself, which I found was quite interesting. And I felt almost like a little bit, when I was teaching them, I realized that they knew a lot more about social entrepreneurship, than I did, because they had been doing this for like
a very long
40, 50 years, right? And here I come, trying to teach them about it. But I think for them it was still interesting, because it made them realize that this part was really like bringing them together, and they there was a sort of moment where they were all sort of applauding themselves, like what great impact that they were having.
Yeah.
And I think they felt proud.
That's a very good word. Like you're motivated, you're engaged, you think of the long term when you are proud of what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think it's something that, I feel here as well, like at ESADE. So, even when I just joined, I felt that, this sounds maybe like a little bit like idealistic, but I did feel that there was a really nice sense of community. Mm-hmm. And I think we have quite a strong sort of mission identity team, and we're working on, we were set up by Jesuits and business people from Barcelona in 1958, where they got together, with this idea of, okay, we need to train, business leaders. And there was actually not so much of that type of training happening then, in Spain. And, so there was this kind of idea of, okay, let's see how we can develop a business school that actually is sort of grounded on these sort of Jesuit values. And I'm Swedish, as I told you before. So I have been discovering this, as during my trajectory at ESADE. So we have these like workshops where we talk about this, and it's a moment as well for reflection and thinking a little bit about purpose, like why are we here? And, what is it that we're trying to do? What is the project, that we're working on?
That's what I was telling you. Like that's the concept of purpose. It's the concept that hooked me when I was doing my master's. Like literally, what is the purpose of purpose?
Yeah.
And there's so many ways in which you can answer that question, and it's fascinating because it's very conceptual, but you can also quantify it in different ways, which makes it more real, and it makes it like bring it down to earth, and that's how you're able to sell it after all. Like, are there numbers or not? So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. No. So in any case, I found it definitely something that keeps us together, and it helps us, work towards a common goal, and probably like coming back to this topic that we discussed in the beginning of meaningful impact. This is a good way of connecting these more traditional values with a business goal, because you're really trying to, through this idea of meaningful impact, seeing how the companies that we're working with can solve problems. How can we have a positive impact on society through the different activities of a business or, a bank or a fund or whatever, right? Different entities can have different types of impact, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of meaningful is that there's a meaning or purpose, but then also it's a kind of a play with words, because not only does it have meaning or purpose, but it's somehow big enough to be meaningful, right? Like significant. And I think that comes to your point about having data and evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's how you prove things. And that's how you get people to buy into your idea and concept. I have two final questions for you. If you want, you can answer a bit more like sharply, like with bullet points kind of thing. The first one is, if you could change one thing about how we teach business globally to better prepare people for the future of work, what would it be?
I think, one of the things that I've been thinking about, is that we tend to push solutions, to our students. Like this is a framework. I was using a framework myself, or a checklist, or things like that. And then they have to memorize those, right? And I think it's not very effective, with how things are changing in the future. It's much more important to teach them how to understand the problem, like how to get to the depth of the problem, and to see and to unpack it, and to see like which are the parts that we can actually work with, and then teach them basically how to think, rather than just kind of push those solutions down their throats.
I like the answer. Teaching people how to think, because common sense is not that common.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Okay, I like the answer. The second question is, if you could change one thing about how we teach business globally to better prepare leaders to drive conscious capitalism forward, what would it be?
Well, I think there I would probably, start thinking about new ways of organizing the world, so.
Okay.
So this sounds very maybe utopian, but I think, in the past century, we have been testing out different economic models, capitalism, communism, different versions.
Yeah.
And of course, we have realized that certain models don't work. And we've had, disasters as a consequence, with millions of people being killed, etc., for these ideals. And we're now at a point, I think, where there are certain models that are definitely questioned, although we're still using them, right? So, for example, like with impact investing, when that sort of movement was launched, I think like part of what we wanted to do was to change the financial markets and how they work. But I don't think that has happened, right? They're still working in a same way, more or less. Although like impact investing, it's very like still a very small part of it. And so I think maybe we need to be a little bit more bold about like what is the world that we want to live in, and how do we need to change the models that we're working with, so that we somehow can coexist in a way that still helps us produce the goods and services that we need, etc., but not in the way it is now, which
is more extractive than actually adding value.
Yeah,
I think it's a great way of ending the interview. I think it's going to give listeners, hopefully it's going to give listeners the tools to question a little bit more what they do, why they do it, and the systems that they find themselves in, be it at university, being at work, be it at a company, whatever it may be. So yeah, thank you so much for leaving us with that question, to question everything, or at least questioning it a bit more. I definitely try to do it, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But it's true that if we want different leaders, everyone should be questioning more things. So thank you so much.
Thank you.